It's Zach Eady with Purdue men's basketball, and you're watching Boilers in the Stands.
Hello, welcome back to Boilers in the Stands. I am your host, Joe Jackson. Joining me is Kraig Bowers of Boiler Diehards. We're just doing part one of just an off-season kind of summer preview show. You know, we obviously recognize it's still June, going on July pretty quick. Still a lot of time for things to change. Some rosters aren't even set fully. Some teams still have 2-3 scholarships open. But some of the rosters are set at this point. So we're just kind of go through a few teams today of, couple other parts out this summer before we really dive in, maybe more September, October, where we really start previewing stuff and things like that. But just wanted to get together, talk some hoops, interact with you guys, just, keep up with the Big Ten and during this lull, try to put out some content. So Kraig, how are you doing today?
Oh, not too bad. I got to tell you, after we talked about whether or not we were going to do the full intro or not, and it just, every time I hear that at the beginning, it just gives me goosebumps. And it's been a long time since I've got to hear that at Mackey. And, it kind of, I don't want to say it gets old, but you kind of forget what type of chills that gives you when you haven't heard it for a while. So I'm starting to get pumped up about basketball season again. Been watching Miles Colvin the last 2 days. A little bit today, I guess. Been really kind of following what's been happening with other teams around the Big Ten. Not a lot of movement for Purdue, but certainly lots of movement for some of the other teams. So starting to get back into it, seeing some videos coming out of practice and pictures coming out of practice. And it's just that time where you start to get excited about it again.
Yeah, for sure. There's, the teams are kind of meeting and stuff. And I don't know if it's like technically practice or whatever the technicality for the rules are, but yeah, seeing some clips come out, which is exciting. I think it's going to be a pretty good year just overall in the Big Ten. I don't know if, I think there might be a worse bottom end, but aside from that, Purdue and MSU are going to be, as of right now, the pretty prohibitive favorites. I think Illinois, Ohio State. Illinois will be, some people will think they'll be good, some people won't. But, you kind of have that group of Ohio State, Wisconsin, maybe Maryland, Northwestern. I'm sure I'm forgetting a team or something, maybe Indiana, depending on who they get. But just a team kind of in that second tier that it's a lot of unknown. And I think that's going to be kind of a theme for me during this offseason. It's just like, how do we project a lot of these teams going forward? But that's the fun of it. So today we're going to start with, we're going to go through Ohio State, Iowa, Penn State, and Wisconsin. We'll just jump into Ohio State right now. They are coming off a lackluster season at best, 16-19, 5-5 in, not 5-5, 5-15 in the Big Ten. They had the 19th ranked offense, 106th ranked defense, and they have a pretty new team. 7 newcomers will be on the roster. You got the freshmen, Tayson Chapman, Scotty Middleton, Devin Royal, and Austin Parks. 3 of those are top 50 recruits in Chapman, Middleton, and Royal, and we're definitely going to talk about them. Parks is ranked 180th, more of, I think, a long-term kind of big. Then in the transfer portal, they get 2 Big Ten transfers in Jamison Battle and Evan Mahaffey from Minnesota and Penn State, respectively. Then they pick up a point guard in Dale Bonner from Baylor, who I think provides some defensive upside. They lose Bryce Sensabaugh, Justice Suing, Isaac Likely, and Sean Neal. So those are kind of just, the overall what their new roster is. They return Bruce Thornton, they return Zed Key, they return Akpara. Gale is kind of the other big piece that's coming back from last year's team. But we can just go to you first. Like, what kind of stands out question-wise or something you're looking forward to for this team next year?
Well, I think obviously, losing Sensabaugh is going to hurt some, right? There's a reason that he gets drafted where he gets drafted. He's an elite scorer. But I really thought there were times last year when Ohio State as a team looked better when Sensabaugh was off the floor. I like the ball in Thornton's hands. I thought that's when Ohio State looked best, 1 through 5, in terms of spraying the ball around and getting a bunch of different people involved. The last half of the season, probably the last third of the season especially, I thought Thornton was huge. In that time, there towards the end of the season, he averaged last 13 games, he averaged 14.5 points, 2.6 rebounds, 2.5 assists in those last 13 games. And then we saw Roddy Gale really take off in the Big Ten tournament. Now that was 3 games, and we don't know if that's a blip, but he was the highest ranked recruit of those that came in last year. So that's who they thought he was going to be. So it's going to be really interesting to me. We talk about how big of a jump players tend to make from their freshman to sophomore year. I think we'll see that with Thornton and Roddy Gale. You bring in the kid from Penn State. I thought he gave some decent minutes for Penn State, but was just buried behind a bunch of people last year. He's got that freshman to sophomore year jump too. So there's a chance for a lot of high growth for this team. And I think people are sleeping on this team a little bit because they feel like Holtman continues to bring in really good recruiting classes, and maybe we haven't seen that pay off. But I'm a little bit bullish on Ohio State this year.
Yeah, I definitely see it. I see it. I'm a little weary, and I think it's just because I think they're going to have to rely on freshmen a lot. But with that, they got some talented dudes. Like Chapman might. This is on January or June 25th, so this is not my lock or my pick. I can change this in a couple months if I want to, but Chapman might be my pick for freshman of the year. Dude's just talented, combo guard, can really score the ball, facilitates well, really, really smooth jumper, really good footwork. Kind of, he's not like big like Sensabaugh, but could potentially be that kind of scoring punch that Ohio State just kind of seemed to have the past couple of years. But also, like, if you're relying on freshmen a bunch, it can go 2 ways, and it's going to be interesting to see. But I don't know. It's a team that's just going to be interesting, right? Like you had Zed Key kind of hurt last year, but then that allows Akpar to kind of develop towards the end. That's one of my questions kind of around them is Key healthy? Is he going to play 25, 30 minutes? Is it going to be closer to 2020? Because I don't know if you can, at this point with what Akpar showed, like, I don't know if you can really play him less than 10 minutes at least, probably closer to 15 to 20. You have Jamison Battle, who comes in off of a straight up just bad year at Minnesota, and he was on a really bad team and forced to take tough shots. But also, like, the big thing for me is Jamison Battle did not get to the rim at all last year. It was like, I could look it up, but I think he had like 35 shots at the rim last year for the entire season. And that's something Ohio State struggled with too. They were 330th in rim rate, which is 330th out of 363 or whatever. They're a team that lives with the jumper. They live with the mid range specifically. Now they had dudes like Sensabaugh, like you said. Sensabaugh is a bucket. He could just go get it, and it didn't matter. Thorne's not a big rim pressure guy. Really is Key and Akpara kind of on putbacks or rolls to the rim, whatever. So that'll be my big thing, is just like on offense, can they get some sort of a consistent rim threat? They didn't show it last year. They haven't really shown it recently. And then on the bigger questions is defensively. Like, can this team defend? I think they have dudes that can do it. I like the Dale Bonner pickup. He's a really good defender. Or coming from Baylor for his grad year here at Ohio State, 6'2", he'll be guarding 1s and 2s mainly, but he can really get into ball handlers. And so if he's playing with Thornton, I don't know if that'll happen a ton or if he'll be more just reserve role. But if he is playing with Thornton, maybe he takes the primary. Thornton can kind of take any bigger guard just with his size. So I think there's upside there because then you got some wings. I don't think Battle's a good defender, but like Mahaffey has shown promise. Gale's, I think, been shown promise. Like Parra has shown promise. Like that's some lengthy dudes there too that can defend.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this a little bit ago, but I think people are sleeping on Battle. He averaged 17.2, 17.5, something like that a game in the Big Ten, the year before, and he shot 36% from three that year. So on high volume, I think it was like 7 attempts a game. He was voted by coaches coming into the season, or media, I'm sorry, coming into the season, he was voted preseason All Big Ten. So like Battle was a dude, and then he just had a bad year, and he was on a really bad team. I think you put him around some talent at Ohio State, there's a chance he returns to that guy that was a potential All Big Ten guy. And if he's that, and then you've got Thornton coming into his sophomore year, you got Zed Key just banging away old school down under the rim, even though he's a little bit undersized. You got Roddy Gale, who's maybe developing into a little bit more of who they thought he could be. And then you bring in 3 talented freshmen to give minutes and give buckets coming off the bench. I know you think Chapman's going to start right away, but either way, like you bring in 3 top 50 guys around that core. I think this team has a chance to be pretty good. And for what it's worth, Andy Katz, and his way too early, has him 3rd in the Big Ten and 18th or 19th in the country going into the year. I don't know if I'm quite that high on him. Maybe just a little bit lower.
I have their ceiling's a top 2-3 team, I think, in the Big Ten. If everything hits, right, you have Chapman coming well, Battle returns to what he was, but it's just, again, like Battle didn't shoot well from 3, shot 31% compared to like 35, 36 a few years before, but he dropped from like a 54-ish% 2-point shooter to 44%. Just a ton of tough jumpers, and maybe it's just a byproduct of being on that Minnesota squad. But I think the upside's for sure top 2-3 team. Like you got Thornton, who could. He's being ranked probably in the middle for point guards coming into the year. He showed flashes that he could be a top 3-4 point guard. And that's going to be another big question, is what can he kind of be? Because I think if they want to be their best, he probably has to turn into that dude. Like he probably has to turn into the guy for them in some capacity. Maybe it's not, 20 points a game or anything like that, but getting to, 12, 14 points, 5 assists, something like that too. Along with other guys developing. So it'll be, I don't know. It's interesting.
So he has to turn into what he averaged the last 13 games of the year?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying, the flashes. Yeah.
Yeah.
If he can do that again and get some better pieces around him, no, they could be good. Quick side note with the Andy Katz thing. Did you see his NBA draft comps?
Yeah, that was bad.
That was tough.
Yeah.
We'll get back to Ohio State. Bryce Sensabaugh, obviously, like Mikal Bridges, as Andy Katz pointed out to us. What's your concerns defensively? I kind of pointed it out with the rim stuff. I'm concerned about that and pick and roll. But do you have anything defensively? Because that was what held them back, right? Like they were number 19 offense, number 101, number 106 defense.
And I don't know. Early in this season, I just thought they had a bunch of guys that looked like they weren't interested in becoming really good defenders, especially on the perimeter. And then when you're playing in the Big Ten and your center is, what is Zed Key, 6'8"?
6'8", 6'9".
6'8" at center. If you don't have good perimeter defense, then to me, that's a recipe for disaster in the Big Ten. But I thought they played, obviously, in the Big Ten tournament, they played better defensively than they had most of the year. But the other thing, too, is, in games decided by 7 points or less, they went 2-10 last year. And even at 5 points or less, it was like 1-6, 1-7, something like that. But I kept seeing these other games that were like 6-point games. So I put it up to 7. They were 2-10 in those games.
Okay.
And they were really young at the guard position last year. So, I don't know, another year experience, another year of just figuring it out. Painter always talks about the hardest thing to learn when you go to the college level is defense and team defense and where you're supposed to be rotationally and all that sort of stuff. So, Sensabaugh leaves, but you're bringing a lot of guys back that got a year of experience under their belt now.
Yep. I think, and then the last thing with them before we move on is just Holtman himself. You kind of referenced like a really, really good recruiter. He's brought guys in. I know there was talk last year. A lot of Ohio State fans wanted him fired, and then they go on this Big Ten tourney run and just back and forth. But one, do you think he's on the hot seat at all? I don't think he is, just from a pure outside perspective. I don't know if you think he is at all.
I don't know. I made a comment like that last year when the spiral started, and I kind of got attacked for making that comment on the socials. But man, it's got to be getting close, right? I mean, there's only so long, and if you look at their tournament success over the last few years, what are we at? So they don't make it last year. They're out in the second round in 22, first round in 21, second round in 19, second round in 18. So, I mean, there's not a lot of payoff here for the recruiting classes he's getting. And I mean, arguably, I'd have to go back through, but I'm guessing over that time period, in terms of total recruit ranking, he's probably got the highest ranking of anybody, if not either him or Michigan, right?
Yeah.
Or well, maybe MSU, but this is the first year in a little while where Izzo's landed a bunch of really highly ranked recruits. So it wouldn't surprise me. He's up there anyway, and it just hasn't really paid off. So at some point, he's got to start to feel that seat getting a little bit hot, I would think.
Yeah, for sure. Last thing, and it kind of goes with it, and I'm going to reference it throughout because I think it's interesting. They were 2-7 in games decided by like 6 points or less. I'm a believer in like, not that it shouldn't be exactly 50-50. I think coaching and that can kind of get it a little bit. But when you get to these games that are 2 minutes and it's less than 5 points, it's a lot of it is just variance. It really is. 2-7 is not a great record. It isn't a ton of games. We'll talk about a team in a little bit that had a ton of close games, but there is that too. Like if it, KenPom, I don't know what they're at currently, but at one point they were considered the unluckiest team in the country. And that's not per se like saying they should have, like just purely unlucky, but more of just like based on like how their ratings were and things like that. They probably should have been expected to win a little bit more than what they did. So there's that part too. Like if they're just due for some natural regression, like if they play that season last year and they end up at 8-12 instead of 5-15, that's three games. That's a big difference. But are we thinking about this team differently even then? So
yeah, probably not. But the other
also if they lost.
Last thing I'll say is, as I started going through all the video clips that you posted, it was amazing to me how often like I was like, oh, that's an Ohio State guy, like just body and build. Right. Yeah. He kind of likes him built like a bowling ball at the guard position, like strong and low center of gravity, just kind of manly looking, and then, I flip over to Wisconsin's recruits and I'm like, oh yeah, that's a great guard guy. Like just right down the line. So,
yeah. So we'll jump to Iowa then. If you got nothing else on Ohio State, Iowa brings back not that much compared to what they had production wise. Decent bit. They finished 19-14 last year, 11-9 in Big Ten play. They are an 8 seed in the tourney, lost to Auburn first round. They were just, another Iowa team, number 4 in offense and number 168 in defense. It's just who Iowa is. For the offseason, they added 4 freshmen and 2 transfers. The freshman is Price Sanford, which is brother of Peyton Sanford, Laji Dembele, Owen Freeman, and Brock Harding, and then 2 transfer bigs in Ben Creek and Even Bronze. I'm just going to start with Iowa. Like I'm worried that for them that they're going to be a bottom 5 team in the Big Ten. They lose a lot. They lost Chris Murray, Philip Ibaka, Connor McCaffrey, and then Aaron Eulis and Josh Ogundele. But losing Murray and Ibaka, even Connor McCaffrey to a bit, not that he was the most important piece, but just kind of could do a little bit of everything. Mm-hmm. You have the stats here, returned 46% of their points in that, 46% of their minutes. Like it's a team that brings back some good pieces. They bring back Perkins, they bring back Sanford, Patrick McCaffrey. But it's also a lot of young guys. I'm pretty high on Price Sanford. I'm really high on Brock Harding. He's unranked, or he might have eventually just got like a basic 3-star. But the dude can just, he reminded me so much of Braden Smith when I watched him. You watch him and the dude's just a winner. He's just,
did you look at what I put on the sheet?
No, I didn't.
In the notes, I put poor man's Braden Smith. That's what I put.
No, really. And he's a little bit smaller, but You go.
Yeah. No, yeah, like I mean, I thought Price looked good on the video that you posted and whatnot. Just looking through that, just looks like a pure shooter. He's got some size, but I mean, he can do more than that. It looks like he can do a little bit of everything. Assist numbers pretty good, rebounding pretty good. Just a big long lead that can move fairly decent, and is a dead eye shooter. But then I got to Brock Harding's tape, and I was like, whoa. Like this guy's jumping off the video to me. Just looked really smart. Looked like he was manipulating defenses, whipping passes around everywhere. And like you said, just immediately that Braden Smith comp comes to mind right away. And I was surprised when I was putting the numbers together on this in terms of percentage of points returning, because they only get 33% of their games started back, but they have 46% of their points scored. So they were getting quite a bit of bench production. And I mean, Peyton Sandford was 6th man of the year last year. So obviously that rolls into that. So they're, in some ways they lost a lot, but there's some teams that have more games started returning, but less points per game returning. So, maybe not quite as bad as it might think right away about it. The thing that concerns me is, McCaffrey tends to, when he has good teams anyway, they tend to be built around one stud, and then everybody else scores 8 points, and he's had Luka Garza, and then he had Murray. And even when he had the other Murray on the team, they ran everything through Keegan that year. And then the next year really focal pointed Chris. And they tend to just let one guy go, and then everybody else just kind of fills in and plays a role behind that one person. And I don't think they have, that's not the type of team they're going to have this year, because unless somebody emerges out of nowhere, I don't see an alpha dog on this team.
No, it would have to be maybe Perkins. But I just don't think I think he's a good player, but I think he's more of a two-way type guy and not like a primary, we're going to just give you 30% usage type thing. Yeah, I just don't like their depth that much. And I guess you could say about some, and like I said, Ohio State, I don't know if they have a ton of proven depth, but I like their freshmen a lot. But their freshmen, like I do, I've said I like Price Sanford. I think he'll be better than Peyton Sandford within a year, probably. Can just do a little bit more on ball. Not a shot at Peyton. Peyton. I think Peyton does his role really well. I think Price can be a little bit more versatile. But like Laji Dembele, I think he has good upside potentially. Owen Freeman's going to definitely need to develop some. And then like I said, I love Brock Harding. I could see Brock Harding starting day one, and I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing for Iowa. It worked out for Purdue if we're comparing to Braden Smith, but also Purdue had somebody named Zach Edey down low that could kind of calm things and center everything around. So, and then just the two transfers, even Bronze and Ben Creek, they're going to have to be big. Like their front court is nobody is proven in the Big Ten as of currently. Even Bronze transfers. I'm blanking now where he transferred from.
Belmont.
My head. Belmont. And then Ben Creek was good at Valpo.
We saw him, right? Last year? Pretty sure either last year or the year before we would have seen him.
Year before, I think. Okay. But he comes in, solid, just big, nothing too crazy. Ben Creek is going to have to potentially be that low post scoring guy. He averaged probably like 20 something at Valpo, but Valpo is really bad. He has good skill, but their big man group right now is even Bronze, Ben Creek. Both are transfers from mid majors. Laji Dembele, Owen Freeman, freshman, and then Riley Mulvey, who hasn't really produced. He's going to be a junior. Those are their bigs right now. Like in the Big Ten, somebody's going to have to step up unless they just buy into this ultra wing lineup, which is something I do want them to do at some point, especially maybe once Price is a little more comfortable in the Big Ten. Do a lineup of, you could even go crazy and do Josh Dix, Price Sanford, Peyton Sandford, Patrick McCaffrey, and Ben Creek, all 6'5 plus. And then, you're hoping on defense. I assume they'll just do their full court trap thing and try to just muck it up that way. And that's probably their upside to hitting defensively there. I do think they might be a little bit better defensively. I like Perkins. I think, Josh Dix has some good length. It's just whether guys want to buy in. And there's a system that isn't really built that way. They want to get out and run, leads them to really good offense. But my biggest concern, just depth. And then they also legit, like with the bigs, they do not have a rim protector at all. It's something they struggle. That was where they were bad last year. They were fine defending the perimeter, like it was okay, but at the rim, they were absolutely terrible. And that's something that's probably going to happen again. And now that you're allowing the easiest shot in the game, bad things are going to happen.
Yeah, for sure. And I was totally wrong. The last time we played Belmont was 2018. So that's what happens when you turn 46.
You
Joe.
think in Liberty?
Like
maybe?
Yeah, I think so. Like 5 years merges into 2 years when you're 46. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I have a lot of concerns for them. Just going back and watching some film on the kid from Valpo and the kid from Belmont. I mean, obviously, I think the kid from Valpo is a much more talented scorer. But even then, it still looked like he was just primarily using his size at that level. I wouldn't say that I thought he was like really, really polished in terms of feel around the rim or footwork down there. And I didn't see somebody that I thought could compete with Big Ten level bigs in terms of going out and getting 15 points a night by any means. And the kid from Belmont just looked like a bruiser. A big, thick, muscular dude. There wasn't much and super slow. But he had slow feet laterally and just trying to stay with other big men making basic post moves around him. So I'd be really worried about them down low and don't know that. Yeah, I don't know. I think Iowa thought they were going to shoot better all the way around last year. And they got a whole bunch of guys that end up around 33, 34%. And who knows, maybe they spray the ball around like crazy and bomb away from threes and shoot better or shoot like they thought they could shoot last year. And maybe it's different, but I know some people have them in the bottom 4. Iowa to me is one of those teams, anytime you bank on them to compete for the Big Ten, they disappoint you a little bit and don't do so. And every time you think they're going to be a bottom 4 team, also still end up in the middle somehow. So I'm not buying the bottom 4 yet. I'm not going that far with this team, but I think definitely end of the middle of the pack.
I'd probably have about a 4. I obviously still need to go through the rest of the Big Ten to fully figure it out. Maybe that 9-10 range, somewhere in there. So maybe not bottom 4, but right in that area. Just the upside is McCaffrey and Perkins are both going to have to just take huge steps. I liked flashes from Josh Dix, and then they're going to have to get some freshman contributions. It might be Brock Harding coming in and being the point from day one, allowing Perkins to be more off ball and stuff. But do you have anything else for Iowa?
I do not.
All right, then let's get to Penn State. And there's a lot of new names for this Penn State team, starting with their coach, Mike Rhodes. After Shrewsbury takes the Notre Dame job, they lose. So they lost Shrewsbury, then they lost Jalen Pickett, Seth Lundy, Andrew Funk, Cameron Winter, Michael Henn, Miles Dredd, Evan Mahaffey, Dalian Johnson, Caleb Dorsey, and Keba Najai. So basically everybody, their only returning players are Jameel Brown, Kanye Clary, and Demetrius Lilly. Got a little bit of production from Brown and Clary, but not much. And it's a bunch of transfers, right? This is Mike Rhodes' first year at Penn State, coming from VCU, where he was pretty successful over his last 5 years or so, at least at that high mid-major level. Last year, they make the tourney, lose first round to St. Mary's. With him, the biggest one that they bring, and I'll just go through the names and then we'll circle back. But Ace Baldwin, they bring from VCU. Nick Kern, also from VCU, if I remember. Then they just bring a bunch of wings for the most part. Zach Hicks, Puff Johnson, Qudis Wahab, Leo Boyle, Raquandis Mitchell, Favor Iyer, DeMarco Dunn, and then a freshman from Iceland, Bragi Goodmanson. I know a lot of people are probably putting this team number 14 or number 13, depending on what you think of Minnesota. I can see a scenario where they just kind of grind their way to like nothing crazy, but like a 9-10. They get that first round bye in the Big Ten tourney. And it's because I'm looking at VCU stats, right? This is they only bring 2 VCU guys, but I assume it's going to be the similar system in that, especially with Ace Baldwin kind of starting everything out. Number 13 in defense. Penn State last year was number 13 in offense, number 96 in defense for Penn State. VCU was number 144 in offense and number 15 in defense. They're a team. They have the 7th highest opponent turnover percentage. They pressed they've pressed the 14th most out of everybody in the country. And he went out and got, they have 6'1" Ace Baldwin, who averaged like a steal and a half a game, or 1.2 steals a game. They have Jameel Brown and Kanye Clary, who are 6'4" and 6 foot respectively. Everybody else is like 6'5" or 6'6" and above. It's just going to be a bunch of dudes with good length that are some 3-and-D potential, some not as much 3 and some not as much D. But I see I need to dive in more to VCU film first, but like I see the upside where they just trap teams enough and they just have 4, 5, 6 games in the Big Ten that they just come in and just kind of impose their will defensively and sneak out with wins. But with that, I don't think I think that's more their ceiling is that 9-10. I don't see them going too much higher above that as of right now.
Yeah. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but I absolutely love this move and that he's going to be at Penn State and just what that's going to mean for the Big Ten in general. But some of these numbers just are almost laughable. Percentage in terms of points per game returning, 7%, 0% in terms of games started returning from that team. I mean, it's crazy where things are at now. And obviously with coaches moving, there are more exceptions to being able to move and to transfer around the country to different places, but just crazy. And their recruiting ranking this year, with all that movement, their recruiting ranking is not available because they didn't actually bring in any recruits that,
they brought in one unranked dude.
Well, yeah, one, and they don't typically rank the foreign recruits. So, with him coming from Iceland, I heard he dominated Iceland though.
He was good.
So, it's going to be a tough swim for them. But like you said, if they bring that VCU style and identity, that's the style and identity that a lot of Big Ten teams struggle with. And if nothing else, maybe a little bit like Joe Tilla bringing, basketball on grass to football, where everybody struggled, like adjusting to Purdue's new system. And obviously they play out of conference more in basketball and they see that type of stuff, but still, they're going to be bringing a type of system and defensively and just the way they play and the type of players they play against that they could give some people some trouble, even if they struggle offensively. The only thing I'll say is looking on tape, like I thought the 2 VCU guys obviously looked very much like VCU guys, but some of the other transfers that he brought in to me didn't look like, even they have length, but they didn't look super quick and super athletic on the defensive side of the ball. So I don't know that he'll have the type of guys to put the pressure on teams that he wants to this year. But I'm certainly looking forward to it long-term and Big Ten teams having to play a team that wants to play that way before they get to the tournament and that type of thing.
Yeah. Just thinking through it, we just talked about Iowa, like a team that has to go from, say they go from like Iowa to Penn State in back-to-back games, just completely different styles is what they'll see. I think Ace Baldwin's getting a little bit disrespected in kind of all this point guard talk. I know he has improved at the Big Ten level, and so there is that. But he's been good. He really has been good. Isn't the most efficient, but has kind of had to do everything. And that might, it's going to kind of be the same here. He's going to have to create for everybody. I'm not saying he will be, but like there's a scenario where he's a top 3 or 4 point guard in this league. If he really turns it up defensively, gets the shot to go. And then that's just going to be good things for Penn State.
Yeah, and he was the A10 player of the year last year. So, that's a good league. It was a little bit down last year, but it's a good league. So, he's going to come in and he's going to be effective and he's going to make some noise. Where he ranks in terms of those point guards, it's hard to say until you see him play Big Ten teams night in and night out. But yeah, the turnovers for me are a little bit of concern, 2.7 turnovers a game. And then their other guard that they bring in from Kansas City, Raquandis Mitchell, who's actually their highest scorer coming in at 17.3 points a game, but not in as high level of a league as the A10. He turns the ball over a lot as well, an extremely high volume shooter that only shoots about 30% from 3. If this team wins, I think they're going to have to do it with defensive identity and hope they can score enough points along the way.
Yeah, for sure. That's where it's going to be. They're hoping like guys like Puff Johnson hit, who's kind of hasn't, higher ranked recruit. Even his teammate DeMarco Dunn, higher ranked recruits didn't really pan out great at their previous stops. You're coming in, Leo O'Boyle. He's not going to. I don't know what he's going to do defensively, but if he gets an open 3, it's going in. I'm pretty confident in that. So, yeah, it's just going to be how does this team gel together. I'm looking at the VCU stats. They got to the rim a ton too. And a lot of that is because they were in transition so much, but they were so inefficient at the rim. And a lot of it, I think, was Baldwin and just some of their other guards. So like if they can force turnovers, they do have to convert at some points on a somewhat positive scale. If that happens, they can get to the 9-10. If it isn't, like if the defense isn't there and they aren't converting into offense, then yeah, they're going to be a bottom 2-3 team. But I do think they're getting, you know, I think there's a little more upside than what most people are giving credit for right now. Just a feisty team overall.
What are your thoughts on the center transfer from Georgetown?
Wahab.
Yeah.
From what I remember, because this was a little bit ago that I did his breakdown, but he had pretty good movement in the post. I don't think he's not going to come in and be some elite Big Ten big, but I think he can handle his own during his 20 minutes a game or whatever. He had some pretty good touch from what I remember. Rolled pretty well, and he's a big body, 6'11". He's their he's their only true big that has actually like played. They have, favorite out here from Miami who didn't play much. He's more of just a pure rim runner. Demetrius Lilly didn't play much for Penn State last year. He is going to be relied on a ton. If he doesn't show up, then like they don't, last year they had a Miles Dredd who was just this 6'4", just built like a tank dude that could kind of just play pseudo center, allow them to play their system. That's not going to happen this year. Like if Wahab isn't good, they're going to have to figure something out quick. I don't know if it's just buying into a ton of wings and play zone and trap and stuff, but he'll be interesting. I think there's good upside. Good upside to be a quality Big Ten big, not like an elite big.
Yeah, I just he looked like he really struggled if he'd get switched out on the perimeter. Not that like there's a lot of centers in the Big Ten that struggle with that. But in terms of the way like a team like VCU wanted to play, I just kind of wonder he's going to have to play in this league. I think had quite a few minutes for that team, like you said, is the only real big man, and they're going to see quite a few big men in the Big Ten. And then how's he going to handle pick and roll and that type of stuff? Against friggin' Tyson Walker at Michigan State and whatnot. So like how's he going to handle that? So to me, that's going to be an interesting mix. Braggs jumped in here and asked if it was a positive or a negative with the Shrewsbury move because he's out of the Big Ten. Negative because he's recruiting closer to Boiler territory in South Bend. Positive because he's out. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, for Purdue based, then from just a pure Purdue fandom, it's I guess a negative because now he is recruiting Indiana where he knows, he lived here, all that stuff. We know the Shrews backstory. So he'll be able to recruit the state well, and it is another competitor. If Notre Dame's relevant, that's just another, then they're up. Then they have the brand names. Not quite probably as big as IU in basketball, but still in that kind of territory where it's another competitor. But on the other side, like I think as Purdue fans, also we're all happy for Shrews. Like I can't think of anybody that's been negative towards Shrews just because he's so good. He's been good. He was really good at Penn State. He was really good at Purdue and just kind of all of his stops along the way. So I think, it's both. You're happy for him, but then also if you're looking from a pure like team advantage perspective, yeah, it's probably a little negative. But I'm happy for him overall, and I'm excited to see what he does. I think he's going to find success pretty quick at Notre Dame. What about you?
Yeah, and for his sake, I hope so. Just a great guy, and I think you look at the way he played at Purdue, or offensively, the way teams played, and then the style of play that he played at Penn State. I mean, that's a pretty drastic change. So the fact that he could, because he had a lot of his footprint on Purdue's offense when he was here, and then to be able to make that kind of a change when he goes to Penn State, obviously just a really good offensive mind. So I would expect him to have success at Notre Dame as well. And you're already starting to see some, Notre Dame pop into top fives or whatever that recruits are naming for their final schools. So I think he's definitely going to put some pressure on both Purdue and IU when it comes to Indiana guys. So from that standpoint, yeah, it's a little worrisome, but I'm happy for the guy. I think he'll be really successful there and look forward to seeing his success as he moves forward. So,
yep. We got anything else on Penn State? I think I'm kind of good. There's, basically the Penn State can be summed up as tons of unknown, maybe good defense.
Yeah. Oh, the kid from Iceland though. Like,
Bragg.
I thought he kind of jumped on that tape. Like the kid just had a really good feel, but looked good with the ball in his hands. You said his percentage was kind of low, but
it was very low.
He's playing against some older guys over there in that league.
Yeah.
He's not playing against just college age kids. And I mean, I thought his shot looked good from a form standpoint. So I'm kind of interested to see what he is. You never know with a lot of the European players that come over. You can watch some highlights and think, wow, that guy's going to come over here and dominate. And then you can not happen. And sometimes vice versa. So I am interested to see what he looks like when they get him.
Yeah, I think for him, it's just going to be the athletic. If he can translate athletically too, and if he can still handle the ball and stuff, I think he'll be more of a 2. I don't think he'll be a primary guard by any means, but he seemed comfortable enough running pick and roll. I didn't see too much from the passing standpoint. Pretty slow defensively, which is the big concern. But it's another dude that he could potentially play point. He's 6'5" and kind of buy into that mold of being a super long VCU player. I don't think truthfully, I don't, especially with Baldwin there, I don't think he plays much this year. But you never know, unless if Raquandis Mitchell or Kanye Clark kind of don't pan out, then yeah, maybe he does get 10, 15 minutes off the bench.
Yeah. Who did that old Boyle kids release remind you of when you watched it?
It's been a minute. I'm going to be honest. I have a name that I assume you want me to say.
Who?
Is it Larry Bird? Is that the release?
No.
Okay, cool.
It reminds me of Klein's. Like he brings it back like this.
Yeah.
Kind of has that fishing reel looking thing going on, or fishing cast a little bit on that shot. But when I watched that first video you put up, and I was like, oh God, like his form's weird. And then I went back I saw his stats for 3, and I'm like, kept watching the videos, like, okay, well, if he repeats it enough, hits it enough, just like Painter used to say about Klein, there's been some guys who have awesome looking form who shoot 30%. So
yeah, exactly.
Yep.
We will. There we go. I lost my stuff for here. So we're going to Penn State, I think, right?
Yep.
Move on to the last team. Before we do that, just if you guys are watching, if you want to if you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe, just helping us out. We're going to try to keep putting out some content and stuff. We do really appreciate that. We are also on Apple, Google, and Spotify. So if you jumped in for a few minutes but aren't able to listen to it all, go back, listen on podcasts while you're doing whatever, driving to work, whatever it is. And if you could rate there 5 stars, just help us out as we really want to kind of elevate this for the upcoming year. So with that, we will jump to the last team that we will talk about today, and that is the Wisconsin Badgers. They went 20-15 last year, 9-11 in conference. They had the 140th ranked offense and the 19th ranked defense. Pretty, in terms of in the age of the transfer portal, pretty quiet offseason for them. The additions: 1 transfer in AJ Storr from St. John's, 3 freshmen in Gus Yalden, Nolan Winter, and John Blackwell. They only lose 2 pieces, and that's Jordan Davis and Jacoby Neath. Davis was, borderline. He started most games. Neath wasn't a huge factor. I think he was even hurt last year. But return basically everybody. They get Wall back. They get Crowell and all that. Klesmit stays. They're going to have a pretty fun guard and small wing type room. The thing that stands out to me most about this Wisconsin team, and that's what makes it so tough for me to really, truly try to figure out what this team is, they were 13-8 in games decided by 5 points and less. So they played 35 games last year. 21 of them were decided by 5 points or less. That's nuts. That's I can pull it up what the rest of the Big Ten was, but that was by far and away the most games. I feel for you Wisconsin fans, just having to go through that every single game. The next highest was Penn State had 14 games by 5 points or less. Wisconsin had 21.
Wow.
And now if we're going back to where I was saying, hey, it should be roughly 50-50. Some factors may bump it to 40-60 or whatever. How did, and I'm getting through of how do I truly analyze this team that their outcomes, were decided on whether a couple teams had a pull-up jumper down the stretch. And there is still a lot to analyze with them, but if they hit a few more and they were, 16-5 in these, and then they make the NCAA tournaments and maybe they may get to a round 2 game, are we
right.
Oh yeah, this is do they have that kind of like that Michigan State bump where it's oh yeah, this is a top 2-3 team for sure in the Big Ten, or if they vice versa. But it is good returning everybody. I'm interested to see what Wall does this year. I know he was hurt for a lot of last year. and it kind of bummed him. And Wisconsin, and as a whole, Wall didn't have a great year in terms of his standards. Can he kind of get back to what they need him to be? And it's just a pseudo one. That kind of leads me to another question, but I've been rambling, so I'll let you go, Kraig. Whatever you got to say about Wisconsin.
Well, all we hear about now in college basketball is it pays to get older. Okay, the old, kind of trope of the one and done experiment with, Kentucky doing that early on and having success with it. It hasn't really paid to be true long term, and obviously the transfer portal, makes it easier to get older faster. And makes it harder, I think, to win with those all freshman teams that are just pure talent and haven't had the time to grow and develop their game at the college level. So I'm a little bit shocked that people aren't a little bit higher on Wisconsin. From what I have seen from like way too early Big Ten rankings, they return 91% of their point production, 88% of total rebounds, 87% of minutes, and 90% of starts. And they have some guys on there that are talented players. And for a decent part of the season at the beginning, looked like a team that was going to compete in the Big Ten. So I'm a little bit surprised that people aren't a little higher on them than what they are. I think they're a high floor, low ceiling team.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I don't think there's any way this team finishes lower than 6th, 7th, personally.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any way they finish top 2 in the Big Ten either. So I think there's somewhere like dead set in that mid. I would be most shocked if Wisconsin somehow dropped out of the mid pack of any teams in there, just because of the experience they bring back. And with that said, there's only one guy that's really got that freshman to sophomore year jump coming in Essegian. Everybody else is a little bit older. So you expect them to keep getting better, but maybe not as high a growth. But Essegian really came on like crazy at the end of the year last year. You would expect him to continue like Fletcher Lawyer and like Braden Smith, as we expect from Purdue next year, to make even bigger jump going in. Early on in the season, he was just a catch and shoot 3 guy. At the end of the year, he was attacking off the bounce a little bit. He was finding other ways to score, finding other ways to contribute. Central Noble kid, I believe, from Indiana. So, I think it's going to be exciting to see where he goes. Partway through the season, my son was telling me he was going to finish on the Big Ten freshman team. He's a Wisconsin fan, as we all know. I told him he was crazy. Ray Fell at the time told him he was crazy, and my son ended up being right, because Essegian played the second half of the Big Ten season just friggin' lights out. But he's in the chat here saying Wisconsin has baby Jokic coming in. So I got to know, Braden, I need you to comment again. I need to know who the heck baby Jokic is.
That would be, he's referencing Gus Yalden. He's like a 6'8", 6'9" center coming from La Lumiere, ranked 115th, I believe. He got the name because he is a solid passer. He really is. It's a fun nickname. He's not like a guy that's going to bring up the ball and facilitate from the top of the key, but I did like some of the stuff he was making out of the post. A little bit undersized at 6'8", but he's still a little bit bigger boy. And just even admits he's like, yeah, I know I don't look like I play basketball, but he is good. He has pretty good footwork. He can step out. He can run pick and pop and kind of step out and shoot a catch and shoot 3. I think he shot 33% at La Lu last year during NIBC play. So there is upside. That is, if we're going purely off rankings, which isn't always the most accurate thing. Their rankings for the 3 guys they bring in are 115, 192, and 206. So I don't know how much we'll see contributing. Yalden will be probably the most important, just based on how their depth is at the moment. Nolan Winter is a 6'10" power forward. I think he needs to put on probably a little bit of muscle before he really contributes. John Blackwell, I don't know how much he'll play this year, because this guard room is kind of loaded a little bit. The top 4 are really good, and Hepburn, Klesmit, Storr, and Connor Essegian. But also those guys, Storr and Essegian will have to play the 3 at some point. John Blackwell is ranked 206. I think we're going to look back in 2 years and be like, how was he ranked 206 and not like 100? I really, really like the game. Good athleticism, shoots the ball pretty well, can facilitate, play on, play off. But I don't know if he'll contribute much this year. That kind of all leads me to this. Like, this is a team that is older, but like, I don't trust their depth at the same time. Their starting 5 will be one of the best in the Big Ten, just on paper, at least at the beginning. It's some form of, you'll have Chucky for sure, Tyler Wall and Stephen Crowell, and then it'll be two of Max Klesmit, AJ Storr, and Connor Seaton, right? Like whatever way you want to combo those and have one come off the bench, that top six is going to be very, very good. And you could put it up against probably most top sixes in the Big Ten. And I would assume it's, number 2 or number 3 off the top of my head, depending on how you rank, some of the guys. After that, though, it's Kamari McGee, or their 7th guy is Carter Gilmore, who gave some productive minutes last year. They're only proven big off the bench. You're hoping you get more from Wall, so you don't have to rely on Gilmore. And then their backup guards is McGee and then a freshman in Blackwell. They have Marcus Ilver, who hasn't really done much yet. Chris Hodges didn't really play much his freshman year last year. Nolan Winter, like I said, another freshman big. So, you have your top 6, which is really, really good. You have Carter Gilmore, who we know can give some good minutes or some solid minutes as off the bench. But after that, like it's who do you turn to? And that's going to be my biggest thing. If 1 or 2 of these freshmen or McGee or something like that step up, then I think they're a legit like top tier team. If not, it's going to be a lot harder. They're going to have to stay healthy, and they didn't last year. Just things like that. Not that I'm hoping that happens. I hope everybody stays healthy and all that. That's when they're going to be at their best. That's when they're going to be the most fun to watch.
Yeah, and they definitely, I think that injury, obviously, to Wall set them back quite a bit last year. I mean, that's kind of when the downward spiral started, and he just never looked the same when he came back. I don't know exactly if he wasn't really healthy all the way through and just tried to play through it or what, but it just never seemed like he got his feel back, and they as a team kind of got their mojo back after he got hurt. But yeah, I think obviously you're right. From a depth standpoint, just not a lot there. But again, you were rolling off those rankings, 126, 147, 210. Connor Seaton was ranked lower than all 3 of those last year going into the season.
Yeah,
Braden Smith
exactly.
was ranked lower. And that's who Wisconsin gets. They're not rolling in top 50 guys. And he finds guys that fit his system. You said they rank 19th in defense. Half of that is because they play so slow. People aren't going to put up a ton of points, right? Rather than situational, really good defensive team. He just finds guys that's going to fit that system. And you know what? When I was watching the tape on Blackwell, I thought, well, he fits for them. I didn't think he was super quick. He's big bodied and, athletic in terms of finishing through contact, but just watching him move up and down the floor, he didn't seem like a super quick guard.
No.
But he looks like a guy that'll fit Wisconsin's system. And then the other 2 guys, you're like, if you were going to go handpick 2 big men for Greg guard, you would pick those 2 guys in terms of just guys that are going to play for him. But you say Winter's going to be a power forward?
He's a power because he's pretty wiry. I think he'll be more like a Wall in terms of usage, but he can step out, I think, better and shoot a 3. He actually went to the same high school as Wall, which is just funny.
Really?
Yep. And then Minnesota. Yeah, I don't know. I think he'll be a 4. I think he'll be a 4 that can play 5 at times, if that makes sense. Especially if him and Yalden kind of grow together. Like Yalden's going to be the 5, and Winter would be the 4 from there. You talk about defense.
Now, I'm going to throw into your wrench of people coming off the bench production wise, because you were only showing scholarship players on your sheet.
Oh yeah, Lindsey.
Okay? The Lindsey kid from Mineral Point High School, which is really close to where my son lives, actually. That kid gave some good minutes at times last year. He played against us extremely well. And he didn't average that much less in terms of minutes than Ilver did last year. So, does he have a chance to be, Grady Eifert walk-on type kid that's going to be able to give you, Grady obviously eventually started, but is he going to be a type of guy that maybe even as a walk-on might give 15 minutes a game that are productive around those guys?
Maybe. I would say no, but you never know. My favorite thing about him is when he got in the game, it is Isaac Lindsey time right from the jump. I don't know. He was, what did he, there you go. I can pull it up. He had 8 points against Purdue. He had 3 against North Texas, 2 against Iowa, 2 against Penn State, 3 against IU.
So we were his shining moment.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he had 2 threes. And then he played 13 minutes against Minnesota, and then not much from there. And he played because of injuries. Now, maybe he could be a guy that gives 10 minutes. I don't think that, depending on how they stagger the lineups and if Chucky can play 30, 35 minutes, they're not going to need too many guards. But if he could be that guy that's their 5th guard in the rotation, like, sure. But I was going to want to go back to the defense because, obviously they do play very slow, and that helps them. But also they're just really good at the rim, and they force a ton of mid-range shots. Or they're not good at the rim. They just they just don't allow shots at the rim. 22nd percentile in defensive rim points per possession, which is not great, but they were like 20th in the fewest shots allowed at the rim. So they're just forcing a ton of mid-range shots because they don't allow they don't allow an abnormal amount of threes. It's pretty average. Just a team that forces you to, they're going to play their job coverage with Crowder, drop or maybe switch with Wall. Just a team that's going to force you to take mid-range jumpers. If you can hit them, you're going to beat them. But if not, you're taking bad shots, and it allows them to have their kind of clunky offense at times and just kind of trudge along. My other thing, and I don't know if this is where a genuine question is, can Tyler Wall be the number 1 on a good Wisconsin, like a good Big Ten team? Or this good Big Ten team, I guess, specifically?
I mean, I think so. He was for a large stretch. Now, I think he struggles when he goes up against guys that are just physically more imposing than him at times. Yeah. But we don't have a lot of those guys in the Big Ten this year. This isn't a year where we have Kofi, Hunter, and Zach. I can't think. I mean, Dane Danger's a big body, but he's not overly like 7'3" or anything, or 7'2" or anything like that. Like those 3 guys. I just can't think. Well, and 3 years ago, Luka Garza, 7-footer. So I don't know that there's a ton of those just physically imposing guys that are going to give him a lot of trouble this year in the Big Ten. Personally.
Yeah, no, he might have a really good year. I guess more of my point is I think he needs to be the second option for Wisconsin to truly reach their stuff. Braggs said 2 years ago. And that's fair, but they have Johnny Davis. Johnny Davis was by far the one,
right?
And Wall can kind of feed off that. If Chucky or even if Sejan maybe can get to that, or something like that, can get to more of this pure one, and they're their kind of main option, and allow Wall to be more of the second option, then I buy them a lot more. But that's going to be the thing I'm monitoring, unless Wall truly was just really hurt, and that really hindered him, and maybe he can be the one. He is coming back for his grad year. He's going to have a ton of experience, so he's going to be the guy I keep my eye on, with kind of grouped with Chucky. If Chucky can be the guy and Wall number 2, then I think they're going to be a very, very tough team.
And Chucky became a better decision maker last year. I thought that was always one of the big question marks of he could have a great game, and then in the last 2 minutes would just make a decision that did not seem like the most ideal decision to make in that moment, and it seemed last year more often than not, he was making the good decisions and making the right plays at the right times. And kid shot 40%, 41% from 3 last year, with only 1.5 turnovers to 2.8 assists. So he could step up. He could be that guy. He could get 15, 16 a game. To me, Connor, the dude averaged 11.7 points in Wisconsin's system as a freshman. That's averaging 17 at Iowa, So, there's a chance for him to step up and get 5 or 6 more points a game too, I think. But I don't know. I'm just a little bit higher. I'm usually not when it comes to Wisconsin going into the year, but I just think people maybe we have 2 teams today that I think people are sleeping on a little bit, that from the early, way too early Big Ten rankings that I've seen.
Who would you, as we kind of wrap up here, because the 2 teams you mentioned are Ohio State and Wisconsin, who would you have ranked higher right now?
Than Ohio State and Wisconsin?
No, out of those 2.
Oh man, that's a good question. I'd probably Ohio State, just because I think there's a lot of talent there. I'm way higher on Battle than you are. I think there's a really good shot that Battle's at least second team Big Ten this year.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I thought he was a dog 2 years ago. He was a big forward that could bang threes at 37%, 17 points a game. I think he's going to bounce back and have a really good year now that he's got talent around him and he doesn't have to do everything. And then again, if you do that, they got so many guys coming back into their second year that should have a big jump. And I'm going to ignore all the Holtman doubters and for some reason buy in and say they're going to be the third best team in the Big Ten this year. But let me ask you quick, just rapid fire. Okay. Ohio State, what's their ceiling and what's their floor? Where they finish in the Big Ten?
Ceiling, like absolute ceiling is second. Floor is 10th. I think they're a wider team for me.
Okay. I'd go 3-8. I can't see them getting around Michigan State or Purdue and in those top two. So Iowa.
Yeah. Iowa floor is probably like 13th. Ceiling's 8th, 7th, 8th.
Okay. I can live with that. So even though I said I have a really hard time seeing in the bottom four, there's a chance that this is just one of those years that is really bad. So Penn State.
Floor is 14th. Ceiling is
12th.
Ceiling's 10th probably for me.
Okay. Yeah, I can live with that too. Because like you said, maybe they just defensively, if he does have the right pieces to play the way the VCU way defensively, maybe they just disrupt some teams and find a way to win more than we think they will. Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. Floor is probably 7th or 8th. And then ceiling's probably 3rd for me.
Yep. I'm going exactly the same thing I said for Ohio State there, 8 and 3 for me.
I think that 3 to 8 is just going to be – that 3 to 8 is going to be like what the Big Ten was last year. I think there's going to be a little more separation – or I guess Purdue was separated last year at the top, but there's going to be like the two at the top, and then I think there's going to be a distinct kind of drop off to the bottom other than just like one team.
Yeah, the difference was last year there was one team that separated, and then really 2 through 9 was separated by like 3 games, I think, or something like that. Because Michigan State had that weird like half game.
2 through 12.
Yeah, was how many games apart?
2 through 12 was separated by 3 games. Indiana, Northwestern, most likely Michigan State would have been 12 and 8, and then Wisconsin and Nebraska were 11 and 12 at 9 and 11, and then there was Ohio State 5 and 15, Minnesota 2 and 17.
Yeah, I think the bottom 4 probably breaks apart a little bit further this year, and I think the top 2 separate, and then so whatever 3 through 10. I'm with you. I think that's going to be all over the board, and who knows what's going to happen there until they really get into the season.
Oh, yeah. We'll be if we do power rankings or whatever, we'll be probably changing those like every 2 or 3 weeks. Or it's either that or you just got to, even if there's 2 or 3 bad games, you just got to stick with whatever and just have at some point that's just got to have to happen. But it's just tough with this league. There's just so much in the middle that it's just like, who knows? It really is.
Well, and if Illinois ever gets a point guard, they get a point guard, they lose a point guard. Everybody thinks that means Kreese is coming in, and then Kreese recommits to West Virginia today.
Yeah.
So, like, what in the world's going on there? Terrence Shannon or Sincere Harris right now playing point guard, I guess.
Ty Rodgers.
So. Okay.
I think that's who it's going to probably end up being a good bit of. But we'll talk about them maybe on the next one, if not on the last one. Do you have anything else for any of these teams? Just anything in general, Big Ten, I guess?
No, I don't really. In terms of these teams, I think we covered them pretty fully. I think it's going to get a lot more interesting as we get into – obviously Penn State brings in a lot of people, but it's hard to even know what's there with a lot of them. Some of these other teams that bring in maybe 3 or 4 pieces in the transfer portal, I think those conversations are going to get really interesting. So I think people will vary widely on a team like Indiana. Some people that will say they brought in a lot of talent in the transfer portal, and some other people will say they didn't bring any fit in the transfer portal to what else they have around them. So good conversations to have in the future sessions.
Yeah, for sure. We'll have, we don't know the exact date, but it'll be coming up sometime in the soon-ish. But talk about another 4 or 5 teams. We'll do a third one. And then, like I said, once we hit September, October, really dive in. So if you got nothing else, then we can just kind of get out of
Good.
here. All right. Yeah, appreciate everybody tuning in. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe. If you're listening on audio, rate us, 5 stars, give us a review. Just really helps us in the end. We appreciate all of you guys, everybody tuning in, just even from last year. And now we're kind of moving into the off season and gearing up for our first full year of Boilers in the Stands. Some exciting stuff coming your guys' way that we have working on the back end. So appreciate everybody tuning in, and then we will see you guys in the next one.